Before we begin, tell me your city and country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these World War II stories travel around the world. Today's story is one of the strangest and most emotional encounters ever recorded between a German POW and an American soldier. It begins with a whisper, but ends with a truth that shook an entire camp. In January 1945, at a U.S. prisoner of war camp in Oklahoma, an American corporal named Henry Walker was conducting routine inspections when something impossible happened. A German POW, quiet, thin, barely 20 years old, leaned forward and softly whispered Henry's full name. "Not Corporal Walker. Not sir, not American," he whispered. "Henry Daniel Walker from Columbus, Ohio." Henry froze. No one in the camp knew his middle name. Not even most soldiers. He never said it aloud. The German POW, whose name was Johann Keller, looked up with pale blue eyes and added, "Your father saved my life once." Henry stumbled backward, speechless. Every guard in the room turned. The prisoners went silent. How could a German POW in 1945 know the full name of an American corporal from Ohio and claim his father saved him? That impossible moment was only the beginning. Johann Keller had arrived at Camp Ruston 3 weeks earlier. Quiet, polite, never argued, never complained. He rarely spoke unless spoken to. Unlike the others, he spent nights tracing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Circles, squares, arrows. Nobody paid much attention. But Henry always had a strange feeling about him. Jon didn't act like other prisoners. He seemed to be watching the Americans, not with hostility, but with familiarity, like he knew them. One night, Henry commented to a fellow guard, "That German kid. He looks at us like he's searching for someone." Turns out he was. During a morning inspection, Henry stopped in front of Jan's line. Routine questions. Name, age, rank. Jon answered quietly. Then, while Henry checked his logs, Jan leaned forward and whispered, "Henry Daniel Walker." Henry froze mid-sentence. He stared at Jan. "How do you know that name?" Jon's voice shook. "Because your father saved my life before this war." Henry's world tilted sideways. Before the war? How? He grabbed Jan by the collar. "What are you talking about?" Jon didn't resist. He simply whispered, "Your father saved me." In 1929 in Cologne, during the flood, Henry's blood ran cold. His father had been in Cologne in 1929 as part of a volunteer engineering group responding to catastrophic flooding. But how could this German POW possibly know that? The guards dragged Jan to isolation. But Henry wasn't angry. He was terrified, because Jon's words were true. Henry had grown up hearing the same story. In 1929, his father, George Walker, helped rescue German civilians trapped in rising waters after the Rhine flooded, but the details were unclear. His father never liked talking about it. He always said, "Some memories aren't mine alone. They belong to the people who survived." Now Henry realized maybe Jan was one of them. That night, Henry sat awake, shaking. How did a POW know his full name? Why mention a flood from 16 years earlier? The next morning, Henry requested permission to interrogate Jan alone. Surprisingly, the commander approved. Jon sat calmly at the table. He wasn't afraid. He seemed relieved. Henry leaned forward. "You have one chance. Explain everything." Jon nodded. He spoke slowly, quietly, as if revisiting memories carved deep into his bones. "I was 4 years old," Jon began. "The river swallowed our home. My mother tried to carry me, but the water was too strong." Henry's breathing slowed. His heart pounded. Jon continued, "A man in a brown coat found us. He lifted me onto his shoulders and told my mother to hold my shirt so I wouldn't float away." Henry felt his eyes burning. Jon looked directly at him. "That man was your father." Jan reached inside his prison shirt and pulled out a folded water-stained photograph. A man holding a small child on his shoulders standing beside flooded ruins. The man wore a brown coat. Henry sucked in a breath so sharp it hurt. "That's my father." Jon nodded. "He carried me to the rescue boat. But when my mother tried to follow, the water took her." Jon lowered his head. Henry whispered, "My father never told me that part." Jon nodded. "He wouldn't. Your father cried harder than I did." Henry gripped the photograph tightly. Jon continued, Before he gave me to the medics, he told me his full name. George Walker. If you ever look for me someday, tell my son I tried my best. Henry's throat closed. His father had died in 1939, 6 years before this moment, and now the child he saved was sitting before him as a prisoner in his care. Henry wiped tears from his eyes, his voice choked with emotion. But how did you recognize me? Jon looked at him, his gaze soft. Your father had a picture in his wallet. It was you as a baby sitting in a little wooden wagon. He showed it to me on the boat. He said your name with so much pride. Henry stared completely stunned. This couldn't be real. Jon raised his eyes. Meeting Henry's. When I saw you here in the camp, you looked exactly like him. He paused, then added, I asked every guard I could what your name was. When one finally said, Walker, I knew Henry's hands began to tremble. This wasn't a spy trying to manipulate him. This wasn't some trick. This was a man who owed his life to Henry's father, and somehow fate had placed them together in the middle of a war on opposite sides. But Jon wasn't finished. I tried to find your father after the flood, he said, his voice quiet. Every year I wrote letters to the address he gave me. Henry shook his head slowly. He died before the war started. Heart failure. Jon's face fell. He closed his eyes and whispered. He was a good man. The kind the world needed more of. Henry swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. Then Jan said something that Henry would never forget. When the war began, I refused to hate Americans. Henry frowned. Why? Because one of your people saved me before I even understood what war was. Jon replied. Henry had to look away. The emotions were too overwhelming. Jon's voice broke. And when I heard your name in the camp, I fell to the ground, because I thought it was your father's ghost speaking to me. Over the next few weeks, Henry visited Jon every day. They spoke about everything Germany before the war, life on a farm in Ohio, Jan's years working as a carpenter, and Henry's childhood memories of his father. They talked about the flood, the people who were saved, and the ones who were lost. Henry started bringing him extra bread from the mess hall. In return, Jan with his skilled hands repaired Henry's broken watch. They laughed together. They cried together. Two men on opposite sides of a global conflict, connected by a single moment of kindness that neither of them had witnessed together. One day, Jan whispered, If not for your father, I'd have never lived long enough to become a prisoner. Henry managed a bitter smile. He saved you just to be captured by me. Jon's reply was simple and profound. He saved me to meet you. When the war finally ended, the prisoners of war were scheduled for repatriation to Europe. Henry pushed hard through the chain of command, doing everything he could to get Jon sent home early. On the morning, Jon was set to leave. He approached Henry, holding the same photograph of Henry's father. But now, on the back, he had written something new. For Henry, the son of the man who saved my life. Henry swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Then Jan said, There is something I want to give you. He reached into his pocket and took out a small wooden toy hand-carved, smooth and perfectly polished. It was a tiny wooden boat. Henry asked, his voice thick, Did you make this? Jan nodded. To thank the man who carried me to safety, and the son who carried his memory. In that moment, all the rules and divisions of war melted away. Henry pulled Jon into a fierce hug. As Jon boarded the transport truck, he shouted over the engine's noise, Tell your father I never forgot him. Henry, with tears streaming down his face, called back, I'll tell him every day. The truck drove away, and Henry never saw Jan again. But he kept that little wooden boat in the faded photograph, right beside his father's portrait, for the rest of his life. And whenever he told the story to his children, he would say, One day, a German prisoner whispered my name. But what he really gave me was a piece of my father. I thought I'd lost forever. Two men on opposite sides of a brutal war became brothers, because of one act of courage in a flooded German street 16 years earlier. War divides nations, but sometimes rarely, it brings to light a truth stronger than armies. Kindness survives longer than hatred, and a single act of mercy can echo through an entire lifetime.